February 25, 2022, in the treacherous depths beneath the Paria Fuel Trading Company, a routine diving operation concealed a looming disaster that would soon raise troubling questions about safety protocols and corporate responsibility. On that fateful day at Paria, Trinidad and Tobago, 5 divers descended into the ocean, but were forcefully sucked into a 30-inch underwater pipeline. As their ordeal unfolds, one survivor, Christopher Boudreau, exposes secrets that challenge the foundations of operational safety in underwater missions. What happened in those depths? How did a routine task turn into a life-and-death struggle? And why did the company refuse to rescue the other 4 divers? This is the harrowing tale of survival, betrayal, and uncomfortable truths. It should have been a day like any other at the Berth 6 platform in Paria, Trinidad and Tobago. The Caribbean sun was beating down on the vast expanse of the ocean, its waves gently lapping against the colossal structure of the Paria Fuel Trading Company. But beneath this seemingly tranquil surface, a group of 5 divers was about to encounter an unprecedented crisis. Faisal Kurbat, Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasar, Yusuf Henry, and Christopher Boudreau were divers and skilled professionals working for LMCS, a company tasked with the vital job of maintaining the hidden arteries of the oil industry, the underwater pipelines. That day, their mission was straightforward, or so it seemed: routine maintenance work on a dormant 30-inch U-shaped pipeline resting on the ocean bed. This pipeline, owned by Paria Fuel Company, a government-operated entity under Trinidad Petroleum Holdings, is a critical piece of infrastructure. It's designed to transport oil from Berth 6, a key unloading point for ships, to Berth 5, a nearby refinery, a seemingly mundane task, yet essential for the smooth operation of the country's oil industry. But things took a drastic turn. As they worked, a powerful and unforeseen force, a delta P, a sharp difference in water pressure, engulfed them, and in moments, all 5 were sucked into the pipeline. Only Christopher Boudreau would emerge to tell the tale. The Paria Fuel Trading Company, part of a state-owned conglomerate, is just one piece of Trinidad and Tobago's complex oil puzzle. This company, alongside others like Heritage Petroleum and Guaracara Refining, plays a pivotal role in the country's energy sector. They manage the nation's only petroleum refinery, oversee the import and distribution of refined petroleum products, and handle hydrocarbons exploration, development, and production. But behind this facade of industrial efficiency lies a tumultuous history. The state's venture into oil began with the National Petroleum Company in 1969. It evolved through various mergers and rebrandings, from Trintopec and Trintoc to Petrotrin, and finally to Trinidad Petroleum Holdings in 2018. It's a story of ambition, financial struggles, and tough decisions, including the controversial layoff of Petrotrin's workers and the restructuring of its subsidiaries. And now, the Berth 6 incident adds a dark chapter to this story. But to understand what happened, let's go back to the beginning. As stated earlier, their workplace was a unique underwater 30-inch U-shaped pipeline. It was an unseen but vital artery of the oil industry that lay dormant along the seabed, stretching between the Berth 6 unloading platform and the Berth 5 refinery. The 5 divers were underwater welders at a depth of 18 meters, installing a cable on a pipe about 400 meters from shore. The team's preparation was meticulous. An air tube was placed inside a diving bell, an 8-foot cube serving as a dry, safe workspace beneath the waves. This innovative structure was positioned over the pipeline, creating a pressure pocket that displaced the ocean water, carving out a suitable area for the divers to work without their gear. It was a well-rehearsed procedure, executed countless times before, but unbeknownst to them, lurking beneath the routine was a threat waiting to strike. In the realm of process safety engineering and management, the tasks undertaken by these divers were far from ordinary. The risks involved in working on isolated pipelines, especially those classified as dead legs, are significant and complex. These sections of the piping system are no longer in use but are ready to be activated when needed. Their inherent risks stem from their invisibility. You can't see inside them. The potential for pressure differences, chemical release, or even explosions is ever present. A thorough process hazard analysis, aka PHA, led by a specialist in process safety engineering, should precede such tasks. It's not just about isolating a pipe, but ensuring positive isolation, a more secure method involving blank flanges or complete disconnection. This kind of isolation demands a detailed checklist, a plan that incorporates the findings of the PHA, ensuring that every potential hazard is accounted for and mitigated. Furthermore, the coordination between the asset owners and the dive team is crucial. They should be fully briefed on the risks identified in the PHA, the isolation procedures, and the specific steps for installing and removing plugs in the pipeline. This collaboration should be documented, signed off by all parties, and form the foundation of the work package. And then there's the equipment. In process safety management, trust in valves or pipeline plugs is minimal. They can fail when least expected. Redundancy in isolation plans and systematic approaches to plug removal are essential. The right diving equipment, tethered to a surface vessel with air and communication lines and a standby rescue team, are not just recommendations, but necessities. Yet, several overlooked risks and assumptions set the stage for an unprecedented disaster. The day was proceeding as usual for the experienced divers. Familiar with the routine, they had performed this type of operation hundreds of times before, but this time was different. 2 weeks earlier, an inflatable plug had been installed in the pipeline as part of standard maintenance. This plug was meant to protect the stored oil and prevent contamination, a common practice for dead legs. However, the routine procedure took a catastrophic turn on this particular day. The divers descended to their worksite, equipped with the standard protocols in their minds, yet unaware of the lurking danger. The situation began to unfold when Ali Jr., one of the divers, handed a wrench to his colleagues inside the diving bell to loosen the valve and release the plug. However, as soon as the plug was released, the dynamics within the pipeline changed drastically. The pressure difference between the high-pressure air in the diving bell and the low-pressure air in the pipe created a catastrophic vortex. This intense suction, unseen and unexpected, pulled in everything around it with relentless force. Air, water, people and equipment were all caught in its grasp. The entire diving bell was suddenly flooded with water and turned into a death trap within moments. Everything happened in a blur. Caught in this chaotic situation, the divers were dragged through the pipeline at incredible speeds, fighting desperately for oxygen. For an agonizing 90 seconds, they were propelled through the pipe, every second a battle against the overwhelming forces around them. Chris remembered trying to prop up his head, fighting to stay conscious as the torrential currents pummeled him and his fellow divers. It was a struggle for air, a battle against the overwhelming pressure. Every attempt to open their eyes resulted in burning pain, the oil stinging like 1,000 needles. The noise of rushing water was all-encompassing, drowning out any other sound. When the turbulent journey finally came to an abrupt halt, they found themselves in an air pocket, offering a brief respite in their dire situation. Christopher Boudrum, who would later be known as the sole survivor, vividly recounted this harrowing ordeal at a commission of inquiry. He described the sheer terror and confusion they experienced. He said he was not sure if he was even alive as he called out to God and his deceased mother. He wasn't sure if he was in heaven or hell or a pipe, and keeping everyone calm amidst such chaos was the hardest thing he had ever done in his life. In the pitch-black, oil-drenched environment, their eyes burned every time they tried to open them. Their throats were parched from trying to hold their breath. Their bodies ached from the physical trauma. They dragged and pulled at each other, united in their struggle for survival. But as their situation became increasingly desperate, a critical decision had to be made. In that moment of sheer terror, Chris realized he wasn't dead. He instructed Faisal, who was behind, to push everyone forward. They had to move if they were going to escape. The divers, linked in a human chain with Chris at the front, began their detailed journey through the pipeline. The conditions inside were hellish. They moved through thick, slippery oil residue. Every movement was a struggle against broken bones. Their progress was agonizingly slow, hindered by the injuries they suffered and the obstacles they faced. Despite the overwhelming odds, they persevered and soon stumbled upon 2 oxygen tanks with regulators still attached along the way. Understanding the risks of breathing the air inside the pipe, Chris advised the men to take small sips from the tanks to maintain a clear supply of oxygen. However, as they continued, the water levels in the pipeline began to rise, adding to their journey. He still noticed some of his teammates struggling to breathe, while others were blocked by debris and unable to move. Realizing the gravity of their situation, he decided to move ahead and assess the extent of the flooding. What he discovered was harrowing. The next segment of the pipe was completely submerged underwater. With only 2 oxygen tanks for 5 individuals, it was clear that proceeding further was not an option for the group. Faced with this reality, Chris had to make the most challenging life decision: to continue alone in search of help. Leaving his colleagues behind was not a choice made lightly, but was born of necessity, so his survival instinct kicked in. compelling him to push forward through the submerged sections of the pipeline. He carried the hope and responsibility of returning with help for his trapped colleagues. As he navigated through the pipeline, Chris thought about the irrelevance of their diving equipment in such a situation. Their job required them to dismount their gear, to work on the pipe fitting, rendering the equipment practically useless in the face of the disaster they encountered. He mused bitterly on the irony. Had they been wearing their diving gear when the suction occurred, the consequences could have been even more catastrophic. In the oppressive darkness of the pipeline, Chris, now alone, faced the most harrowing part of his journey. With the weight of his colleagues' lives on his shoulders, he pressed forward. The pipeline offered no comfort, only obstacles and the ever-present threat of running out of air. The pitch-black environment was disorienting, and every decision he made was a gamble between life and death, as even the slightest misstep could mean the end. As he swam, his mind raced with the possibilities of what could be happening to the rest of the team at that very moment. In a twist of fate, as his oxygen tank neared emptiness, his hand brushed against another metal object in the darkness. It was another oxygen tank, discarded or lost in the confusion. Desperate, he grabbed it, fumbling in the dark to find the regulator. To his relief, although there was no mouthpiece for breathing, he managed to get a few more breaths. The newfound oxygen supply was a small beacon of hope. At this point, his journey was only a blur of physical exertion and mental focus, punctuated by moments of near collapse and renewed determination. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he emerged into an air pocket. This brief respite offered him a moment to gather his thoughts and strength, but the respite was short-lived. He knew he needed to find the riser to escape the pipeline. Navigating through the half-flooded sections, Chris encountered another air tank, a small but critical aid. He was getting closer to the riser, the exit point from this underwater nightmare. Yet, as he prepared to dive into the last flooded section, a familiar voice echoed through the pipeline. His fellow diver and neighbor, Ronald Ramutar, called out to him. Ronald's presence in the pipeline was both a shock and a relief. The realization that someone else had ventured into the treacherous depths in an attempt to help was comforting. Ronald urged Christopher to pause before venturing into the last flooded section, but time was a luxury they no longer had. They had lingered in the perilous pipeline for too long. Survival now hinged on swift, decisive action. Chris communicated his urgency, explaining that they couldn't wait any longer. Pressing forward, he reached a critical bend in the pipeline. This point marked a decisive moment, a fork in their underwater labyrinth that could lead to salvation or further despair. It was a gamble between two possibilities: Berth 5, blocked by a plug, or Berth 6, their entry point. Weighing his options, Christopher gathered the last remnants of his strength and determination. This was his moment of truth, the final test of his will to survive and save his crew. With a deep breath and a push of sheer willpower, he propelled himself towards the riser. The journey was exhausting, his body screaming for rest, but his mind was set on survival and rescue. Every stroke through the water was a battle against his physical limits and the relentless pressure of the deep. Finally, after what seemed an eternity of struggle and uncertainty, Christopher reached the top of the pipe. The relief of emerging from the depths was overwhelming, but the ordeal was far from over. Amid the chaos beneath the waves, a parallel drama occurred on the surface, marked by courage, controversy, and critical decision-making. Michael Kerbin Jr., son of Faisal Kerbin, the leader of the LMCS professional diving team and one of the trapped divers, was near the accident site when the distress call came through. A diver himself, Michael's instincts kicked in, and he immediately rushed to the scene. To his dismay, he found no ongoing underwater rescue operation. Determined to act, Michael rallied support from his relatives, who were professional divers, and plunged into the murky depths. Equipped with an umbilical for air supply, he dove 15 meters deep into the oil-filled pipeline. In a twist of fate, it was Michael who located and rescued Christopher Boudrum, the sole survivor. Their relief was short-lived, however, as they heard faint sounds from further down the pipeline, indicating others were still trapped. Michael attempted a further search, hoping to find his father. However, he was hindered by the limitations of his equipment and could not venture deeper. Despite his willingness to continue the search, he and his team were halted, and their efforts were deemed a breach of health and safety protocols. Above the water, Colin Piper, the terminal operations manager at Paria, faced a moral and professional dilemma. He had to decide not to authorize unofficial rescue attempts, emphasizing the enormous risks involved. Piper empathized with Michael's bravery in attempting to save his father, but argued that sending untrained individuals into such a hazardous environment would be irresponsible. He questioned whether it would be right to risk more lives, particularly in such emotionally charged circumstances. His stance was clear. While the desire to rescue the trapped divers was understandable, the potential cost to human lives was too great. Upon emerging, Chris immediately informed the medical staff and rescuers about his colleagues still trapped in the pipeline. He provided as many details as possible, hoping it would aid in their rescue. Despite his efforts, the response team from LMCS found it hard to believe his account, assuming that the pipeline was full of oil and that the oxygen tanks would provide only limited air. Rescue divers from LMCS acted upon this information, diving down and knocking on the pipeline, trying to locate the trapped men. To their relief, they heard knocks in response, a sign that at least one of the men was still alive and fighting for survival. However, finding a way to safely extract them remained a challenge. As the hours passed, the situation for the trapped divers grew increasingly dire. They struggled with injuries, diminishing oxygen, suffocating oil fumes, rising seawater, and accumulating carbon dioxide. The desperate hope for a rescue faded with each passing moment. 5 agonizing days later, the bodies of the trapped divers were recovered. Ali, Henry, and Kurban were found first on February 28th, followed by Nagasar on March 3rd. The discovery brought a devastating closure to the hopes of their families and friends. The pain and trauma of identification at the Forensic Sciences Center were heart-wrenching, especially for Joseph Henry, who could only be recognized by his son because of a distinctive tattoo amidst his disfigured and oil-covered remains. The incident also exposed the complexities and challenges of rescue operations in such extreme conditions. In the wake of the tragic incident at Paria Fuel Trading Company, an extensive investigation was launched to uncover the events leading up to the tragedy and to assess the response efforts. Responding to this, the Minister of Energy, Stuart Young, appointed a 5-person investigative committee. This committee was expected to report their findings within 45 days, possibly delivering a report in as little as 2 weeks. However, the composition of the committee raised questions among the opposition. The commission sat for hearings in November and December at the International Waterfront Center in Port of Spain, scrutinizing every aspect of the incident and the subsequent response. During the inquiry, key figures from Paria and LMCS provided testimony. Kazim Ali Snur, head of LMCS, admitted that the company had relied on Paria's assurance that the pipeline was level and did not independently assess its slope, undulation, or configuration. This oversight was critical, as it was later suggested that the undulating nature of the pipeline may have contributed to the Delta P event that led to the accident. Catherine Balkasoon, Paria's acting technical lead, faced tough questions about the company's response time and the decisions made during the crisis. Her emotional response in the court illustrated the intense pressure and moral dilemmas faced by those in charge. Adding a deeply human element to the tragedy, the Commission of Inquiry played a GoPro audio recording of the trapped men's voices. The recording, capturing their last hours, was not filled with panic but camaraderie, optimism, and hope, leaving a profound impact on all who heard it. Michael Way, Paria's technical and maintenance manager, testified about the company's cautious approach to rescuing the divers. He explained that Paria sought to assess the pipeline's conditions and use only approved divers for rescue efforts, fearing a second Delta P event. Paria's lack of detailed information on the pipeline's contents and the diver's exact location made a risk assessment challenging. Way also revealed that the company did not immediately question Boudram about the pipeline's interior upon his rescue, prioritizing his medical treatment over gathering information. The testimonies and findings of the commission aimed to shed light on the numerous factors that contributed to the tragedy, including potential gaps in safety protocols, the pipeline's physical layout, and the emergency response. The inquiry's outcomes were awaited with anticipation, not only by the families of the victims, but also by the entire nation, as they sought answers and hoped for measures to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again.